to my YouTube channel. I laugh a little bit because I have been on Instagram for quite some time, Instagram and Facebook. And when I originally started doing these little video segments, I was supposed to be on YouTube. But I was so afraid of doing it. And so that was my first step into coming here on YouTube. And now I'm just like, it is what it is. Like, yeah, make a video and you post it. And if it works, it works. But the thing that got in my way of doing that is this little thing called fear. I think it was this last week that I just posted this meme, and it was a quote that said something along the idea of, if you let's see, it was if you have a fear of not being good enough, and to have a fear of being too much, it's actually a fear of being yourself. And I won't even lie to you, fam, I am very much this way. It's weird that when I started stepping into my own purpose or in my own power, I realized how afraid I was about just authentically being myself, which is weird because it's also something that I pride myself in, being able to show up as parts of myself authentically. But to actually be vulnerable enough and show up as myself is such a challenge. And so I really thought about, what that was all about. And the reality is, it's a fear of being afraid that when I do show up as myself, who I am, that it won't be good enough or it'll be too much, and those around me won't receive it well, or the people that are in my community or group of friends or my colleagues or my peers won't look at the work that I do and buy into it. And I think it's a very normal, natural human feeling. And so I kind of want to talk about that today and how it holds us back. And then I also want to talk about how I don't know how to look at fear from just maybe different perspectives. So I think about this idea of, being vulnerable or being afraid of doing something, and how that limits our beliefs. And what it really comes down to is the beliefs that we think about when we're afraid of doing something. Conquering our fears, whether it's a fear of bugs, a fear of heights, a fear of not being good enough, it's all the idea that you've created a narrative around that is telling you that whatever you want to do is not safe and that there's high risk involved. And so it is your tendency to try to protect and do what you need to do to secure whatever asset that it is that you have. So this weekend, I personally conquered one of my fears and I went ziplining, and I am so afraid of heights. I am that girl who doesn't even like to go over the bridge when you are on a busy street, and then they have those pedestrian crossover bridges. I don't like going on those because they terrify me, and I can see those cars below, and I'm just thinking, this is not the way that your girl's supposed to die. All of these things just cross through my mind. Well, when I really thought about this idea of where did that fear come from, I remembered that when I was super little, I had a friend who was afraid of fears or heights, and then she told me, she's like, well, I'm afraid of heights because this bridge and such fell, and what if I fall and I look over and I could die, and I was like, oh, that makes sense. And I remember we were looking over something that was super scary, and I took her belief about falling and not trusting that support to hold us, and that created my fear of bridges and my fear of heights and anything in between. So then the next time I am on a bridge, I remember that conversation. I looked over and then was like, oh my God, this is terrifying. This is scary. And the narrative continues and continues and continues. And obviously now I'm into adulthood and that fear has still stuck with me. So one of the things I'd like to bring up is the fear that you have even yours, or was it your fear to begin with? I say this again because, we soak up the world through other people, our experiences, our loved ones. And so, is it truly something that you feel like you have inside of yourself, or was it something that you picked up along the way? And then examine kind of like those beliefs that come around to it. So, for example, with ziplining, I realized that the more that I stood on that platform and I contemplated it, the worse that the thoughts got. Because then it was like you got into your head, and then the cycle continues to cycle about how I'm not going to make it to the end of this like rope. But the reality is, if I just got on the top of the platform, I said, okay, the little thingy, my bobber hook thingy is secured, I'm attached, and they said this harness is going to hold me up. The person ahead of me went, they did just fine. I believed, and I jumped. And then there was no time to overthink it. But when I like sat there and I contemplated all of that, it just got harder and harder to make that jump. So I'm going to encourage you as well to not be so hard on yourself and like hold or sit on things that are making you scary or that scare you, because when you hold on to them and you let that momentum build, it gets harder and harder to go in the opposite direction or change your momentum. On the other note, there's this other idea of fear that we don't even realize that we do, and I think it just comes back to a survival things as humans, right? At the end of the day, we want to survive. So we're going to do whatever we need to do. Our body will do whatever it needs to do. We'll be in fight or flight, and that will help secure our offspring, or it will help secure our assets or anything that we're just like trying to protect. And I think that it's interesting that sometimes we make decisions based on what we think we need to do to keep ourselves safe, because we have a fear of the unknown, or the fear of the uncertainty, or the fear of being exposed and vulnerable. So think about how many things in your day-to-day do you not do because you have a fear of, I don't know, being vulnerable. So let's talk about at work. Do you propose your really good ideas to your colleagues because you have a fear of like raising your hand or being told that your idea is not the direction that they're going to go? So do you not speak up? Think of all the opportunities that you might or may have missed up, or the promotions or that have gone because you're afraid of putting yourself out there. Or even like when, if let's say you're asking for a bigger salary, people are afraid of like not being grateful, or they're afraid of coming off as aggressive, or they're wanting too much, and so then they don't put themselves out there and ask for what they're worth. So like that's like a few examples on the work level. But then at the same time, in intimate relationships, what are you doing to protect yourself from feeling hurt? So are you not expressing your true emotions because you feel as if when you do, there's the ability that your vulnerability will be taken for granted? Or in relationships, are you just not even putting yourself into places that are allowing your friends or your families or your partners to love you because you're afraid of what will happen when you open up? And so I think on that's like those relationships are just like more than just, I guess, intimate, but also like with friends. There's something that's so beautiful in the idea of being open and being carefree. So I think a lot about how open kids are because they don't overthink things. They haven't built this like repertoire of what is going to stop them. They just do. Kind of like that Nike saying, or not symbol, I guess symbol, but slogan, just do it. Because they there's the scariest thing was like this monkey drop thing, and you free fall, and the only people that I saw that were going to participate in this ziplining activity were kids. And I thought to myself, this is so interesting, because again, their mind is like open, and to them it's like, this is fun. And so sometimes I think, can we look at our own fear and approach it as this is fun, or this is going to make me stronger? Because I know for myself, it's like, if I can get out of my space, if I can start promoting myself with a more positive statement or more positive anything, then I'm more likely to do something. So if something that gives you a big fear is too challenging, can you reorganize it or start small? So start with something that makes you feel better. So the first time that I actually ever filmed a video, no one's ever seen it. I filmed it in my bedroom, and I only sent it to my coach. And it was terrifying, which was weird, but it felt good to just get it done. There's no way that I could do what I want to do or share the messages that I want to share or touch the people that I want to touch if I don't start with something. So I started with that, and she's the only person that has ever seen it. And so it's like really funny because now I'm like more open-minded. And this is a shocker because at the end of the day, I am so outgoing. I love a good camera. I love being the center of attention. I'm an extrovert to the T, and I'm like the youngest in my family. So all that sounds like fun and fine, but there's something pressuring about it when it has to be like in a public platform. And there is a sense of vulnerability when I, share knowledge. And so I am just trying to, I guess, get you to think about what your overall bigger goal is, and then what are some like baby or smaller steps that you can take to getting there. So maybe if you, I don't know, I've always wanted to sing, but you're like nervous or public speaking, start with yourself. Start with writing something out and then performing it for yourself, and then maybe perform it for little kids because they are amazing hype people. They'll be like, good job. And then, build it up to the people that you want to be able to public speak for. Or, maybe it is, I had a really good idea, but it just left my brain. But maybe it's just like these like little steps of like exposing yourself and starting to create a different narrative, because as you've created such a big narrative in one direction, now you have to start experiencing things in the opposite direction, and know that there might be some setbacks or things might not go perfect, but eventually you will either build some resiliency or keep going in that direction and start to find some positive momentum to spark you in the direction that you want to go with. I don't know, I just like to feel like fear is something that can be so debilitating, and yet it is all created in our brain. It's like this abstract thing, and in some ways sometimes it propels us to be great, and but what happens when your fear was that you weren't good enough, and so you spent your whole life working on that and showing people that you were? And what happens when you want to start to love yourself or teach your kids how to love yourself? You have to learn then how to break barriers with that fear. And so you have to do that work within your head. And you know what? Some fears are very real, like very real. And I'm going to say maybe a fear of like being ill and you are actually diagnosed, or maybe you have been exposed or you have been a victim of some type of trauma, and so whatever fear you have is valid and it's real, and they're scary. And so this is not to minimize some people's fears, but what I'm gonna say about that is, in order to overcome those fears, you have to come to those fears. So we have to identify them. We have to look at those fears, and we have to call them for what they are. So I always say the first step is always identifying, and if you can identify what your fear is, that's the first step to overcoming it. And then slowly figure out a way to meet that fear head on. And so whether it's baby steps or whether it's full on, take the time and the space that you need, but give yourself some credit for having that awareness that it even sits there. And if maybe you are in a place where you're like, I don't really have that many fears, ask some people if who know you really well, if they can say something that they feel like is holding you back, because chances are sometimes we are so unaware of our own greatness or our own ability to like accomplish more or take something on, and other people see those beautiful things about us. So maybe ask someone the question, like, where do you think that I am selling myself short, or what do you think there's a barrier that's getting in my way of maybe like a goal that you have set that you want, and see what happens, and see if you can find out kind of what's going on there on a subconscious note. So that is my 2 cents about fears. With that being said, I wish you all a great week, and I want you to have a most beautiful day. Take care and have a nice day.